All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. Today, we are going to spend some pretty good time talking about the fact that you don't freaking control the government. So stop getting bent around the axle. And what do you really do to build resilience in political crisis? So sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at her. It is a wonderful and awesome and incredible time to be alive and also to be a political junkie. 2024, doesn't matter where you are in the world, has some pretty impactful elections that are going to occur. We have some pretty crazy legislative decisions being made in some countries in the Western world that impact individual rights, etc. And all of this has got the Twitter sphere and everybody wrapped around the axle. So what do you do? Today we're going to talk about the dichotomy of control, political shocks, and your insulation strategy to navigate all of that. Thanks again for joining us here at Inside My Canoe Head. The goal of this is to take real-life information, provide you with some pretty good strategies that you can employ free of charge to be able to navigate the shocks that are beyond your control, right? That's what we do here at Inside My Canoe Head and our parent company, Preparedness Labs Incorporated. So first, your dichotomy of control, right? This is the basis of some of the most famous Stoic quotes that you will hear out there, right? I'm not even sure which Stoic it comes from. It doesn't really matter. I read it regularly in my daily reference to my daily Stoic book from Ryan Holiday that I read every day. But the question here is the dichotomy of control. And it simply means that everything that happens in life is either in your control, out of your control. And what I paraphrase from the Stoics thinkers is, we are in control of very little, and that is precisely enough to be impactful in your mind. But the idea being is, we live in a democracy here in Canada, where I'm from, and a lot of the countries that are on our download list, 58 in total, are democracies. Not all of them, but the vast majority are pretty decent, safe democracies. What that means is that in the political sphere, you get a say, but you don't get the final say. And part of living in a democracy is whether you like it or not, and in fact, nobody cares whether you like it or not, no matter what happens in the outcome of the election, you have to accept that this is the government that you, the collective society that you are voluntarily being a member of, has chosen to put into place. That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. And let's be clear, in my country, I think the current government is crazy, off tracks, etc., but they are the legal, legitimate government of my country. They have the authority to enact laws. And if I, as a citizen, disagree with that, I have certain rights to protest. I have rights to argue against it. I can advocate for different alternative solutions. But in the end, I essentially have a dichotomous choice. I can comply with the rules as my duly elected government has imposed, or I can GTFO. I can leave, right? It's really not that complicated. It's your decision to allow it to affect what you do, to have an impact on your life. It's a question in my mind of emotional intelligence, which is a huge benefit in a crisis and a huge benefit to people, individuals, is, do you have positive control of your emotions? Do you allow or disallow people to affect your life? Or are you just somebody that gets triggered by everything and you're running around, so-and-so made me mad, so-and-so made me angry, made me sad? In other words, are you a person who allows other people to make you angry? I guess that's emotional intelligence in a nutshell. But the question is, if you live in that democracy, that's the dichotomy of control, right? I vote because if you don't vote for the best of the horrible options, which is sometimes what we have to choose, then you need to STFU because you don't have a say. If you choose not to vote or you intentionally spoil a ballot, then I really don't care what you have to say, because your opinion is now moot and irrelevant in the country because you don't participate in the democratic adventure. So that being said, with your dichotomy of control, understanding that, we look at political shocks and as they occur. And a lot of time, these are exogenous shocks, not always external to the country, but these are usually things that happen and we don't know how they happen. We can't foresee them happening. So a government chooses to react to an event that is beyond its control. For example, you had the October 7th massacre in Israel. Every government around the world chose to react in a slightly different or considerably different way, right? Nobody knew that shock was coming. That shock happened, and governments made the choice to react. You may not concur with the decision of your government, the word they chose, or the response to an external event. That doesn't matter, because the government is never going to ask you what you think it should do. The government is never going to ask you whether you think this is a good position to hold or not. They have a set of advisors that speak the language that they want to speak, etc. So we understand that these things happen. The events happen. My government, the government of Canada, the government of the United States, governments came out and took a position on it. Does that mean it's my position because I'm a Canadian? No, it means the government of Canada has taken a position. I'm intelligent enough to look at the data analysis and to look at actual real life information and then make an intelligent decision or take a viewpoint after a couple of days. It's pretty simple, right? So when these exogenous shocks happen and your government reacts, you need to de-link yourself from that decision, right? That's not your decision. You don't own that decision. And then allowing yourself to get bent around the axle because your government has said something that you disagree with. Again, jumping on Twitter, hammering away on that electronic keyboard to tell the world how you feel, and in no way, shape, or form is going to change or alter the international words that your country chooses to use. So basically, who cares? Who really cares what your government has to say? The other one, though, is the imposition of new rules and regulations. Now, that can be as a result of exogenous shocks on the outside, or it can be in role of what we often see in democracy is sometimes a government, based on issues that happen or something buried within their platform, they come along and they bring out this new set of rules that you didn't see coming, but they're in the government and they have the legitimate authority to put those rules into place. You have the right to protest. You have the right to protest within the protest laws in your country. And this is something that we see a lot on this Twitter sphere, as I call it, and on social media, is that everybody says, well, I have a right to protest. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. You think you have an inherent right, but that's provided for in your government organizational structure. So if you're in a constitutional monarchy or you're in a constitutional republic like the United States of America, you have prescribed freedoms that are assigned to you by the government, right? Now, you may not like that wording, but I don't care. Somebody can come in and, and maybe they can take it away from you. Maybe they can't. I'm not sure of your jurisdiction. The point being is this, is you have your ability to protest, argue, and advocate is going to be different depending on the country you live in. There's no common human standard for the ability to protest, right? And a bit of a side note, remember, every time somebody says you have a right to something, a right must come with an obligation to somebody else, right? So if you say humans have a right to housing, housing is a human right. That means that someone else at no cost to you is required to provide you access to something, right? But that's not no cost. That's putting a burden on somebody else to provide you with something. Plus, the parts of rights that is an uncomfortable truth that people don't like to speak about is, if you have the right to free speech, you have a duty and obligation and a responsibility to that right to follow the rules, right? If you want a right, you have duties and responsibilities as an individual that accompany a right to anything. Whether it's in your Bill of Rights, whether it's in your Constitution, whether it's in your Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it doesn't matter. Those are not absolute. They come with duties and responsibilities assigned to them. And if you try to tell somebody that, access to clean water is a human right, okay, but if somebody doesn't have access to clean water, who then has been given the obligation to ensure they get it? Because if there's no obligation aside, then it's not a human right, right? Then it's not something that is an absolute right. Anyhow, careful about getting run down this idea of I have a right to. And this happens every once in a while. And I don't know if you travel. I love to travel, never get enough of international travel. When I'm in somebody else's country, my inalienable rights that exist in my previous country, they disappear, right? When I'm a guest in the United States of America, probably the country that I visit the most, when I am a guest, and remember that it's a guest, I have no right to be in the United States of America. It is a privilege to be admitted to the country, and I am a guest in that country, and it's my responsibility to follow their laws, right? Nobody gives a care whether I agree with them or not. Right? So if you're down in the United States of America, or you're an American and you come up to Canada, you have a duty and responsibility to follow the laws that are in front of you. That's the whole point of when it's time to protest, right? So you have a government imposing a new rule or regulation, or you have a pivotal election. And I think that's the big thing that's on everyone's mind right now about governments' dichotomy of control and political shocks, is because the United States of America, whether you agree with it or not, plays such an important role in the regions of the world and events that occur in there, and they're very, very influential due to the resources, economic strain. The US dollar is a reserve currency in most of the world. What's happening on November 5th is going to be incredibly important for the world. Now, I don't care what side you're on. I am a Canadian. I have no say in the U.S. election. I have no right to say that the Americans made a bad choice. I have no right to say that the Americans made a good choice. The Americans will choose who their president is, and the rest of the world will live with it. And that's just something you have to accept. And again, it gets back to what I keep repeating here. Nobody cares whether you like it. They really don't. The world doesn't care whether you like or don't like something. You have to learn to navigate it. And the last thing about political shocks before we get into the insulation strategy is you have lame duck leaders. Now, the U.S. president is often seen as a lame duck when they're in the second half of their second term, which means they essentially are ignored by the other side, and they can't get reelected because of term limits that exist. They can't change the Constitution. Nobody cares who they are, and everybody's zeroed in on who the next president will be, because it'll be one of two choices for one of the two parties, Republican or Democrat. So that's a very, very dangerous time. The other one is example of what we have right now in Canada. We have a Canadian prime minister who is grotesquely unpopular in this country. And if the polls are anywhere near close, if there was an election, he is going to get absolutely, utterly eviscerated at the polls. But he has the legal authority to stay in for 5 years under the Canadian Constitution. We have a fixed election law. It doesn't have to happen. The government can exempt to that. So there's likely to be an election in October of 2025. We're in April of 2024. You've got a government that is grotesquely unpopular with the citizenry. They know they're going to get fired in a year and a half, and they have, because of an arrangement with other political parties in a coalition, they have unlimited, unchecked, and unfettered power for 18 months. That is a recipe for somebody to do something exceptionally dangerous, right? So understanding those three shocks, and I'll review them quickly. An exogenous shock that happens out from an event around the world, and your government chooses to react in a certain way. The second shock is when your government imposes a set of rules upon you that you didn't see coming, that weren't part of their election platform. And the other one is when you have a lame duck or an unpopular government who might do something crazy and erratic to either try to get reelected or to try to impose an incredible pain on their political opponents. So these things can happen. So really, for the listeners, what we want to talk about is this is a part of preparedness that the world really doesn't concentrate on. When everybody thinks about preparedness, we sit down and we think about kits and equipment and evacuation and things along that line. We don't think that preparedness is actually about building resiliency. And your resiliency is your ability to absorb and, if necessary, respond and recover from exogenous shock. Because I argue if you do preparedness well enough, preparedness is represented in the word absorb. So if your preparedness is robust enough, then you don't have to react or respond or recover from events as they occur because you're able to stay on the truth. It's like getting punched in the face and still standing up. Great. Thanks for the hit. I'm still going on with my day and doing exactly what I intended to do. So the first part is for online neutrality. And I advocate for this for your insulation strategy is, number one, other than your own self-interest and trying to narcissistically prove to the world how much you understand, there is little to no point in getting on a bandwagon or starting a Twitter fight or a Twitter war or getting into some type of online battle about political outcomes. It serves no one other than you're looking for your gotcha moment, and you can probably be far more productive outside. I own a business, Preparedness Labs Incorporated. I have a podcast, Inside My Canoe Head. I have a number of businesses, and what I'm not interested in doing is taking a significant or impactful political stance or cultural stance or something else along that line online, because what it does is it affects so many other things, right? Because, in a business, there are a team of people that are tied to the business, right? And if the business does something dumb online, it ties and impacts a whole bunch of people. It's just not the dumb voice who says something. It's all of the other pieces in the pie. It's like when a little over a year ago, Dylan Mulvaney was hired by Bud Light to make that commercial about Bud Light that caused the internet backlash and the community backlash. Everybody thought that was great. We taught the brand a lesson, and you did. You saw what they came back, the money they poured into UFC, the NFL, and a whole bunch of other things. Well, they got Kid Rock back on board. They got everybody to say that Bud Light is cool again, right? What we never think of is the thousands of workers at Bud Light that temporarily got laid off or potentially could have lost their employment because of something dumb that their company did, right? That's the part that we never seem to think about when we go down this idea of let's do the cancel culture, let's destroy somebody, etc. So we always advocate for online neutrality. I am happy to sit down with you with a thing of scotch, smoke a cigar, smoke a pipe, whatever it is. We sit down, put our feet up, and we can solve the world's problems. But attempting to do that in a logical format is hard to do on the online space because individuals have a significant difficulty and challenge in being able to have an actual thought out, thorough, logical, and intelligent debate. Everybody's a one-liner online. Fair enough. I love free speech. And remember, free speech is I absolutely, without question, protect my opponent's right to lie online. That's free speech. I want you to be able to lie and lie repeatedly and regularly online without repercussion, because that's free speech. Because as soon as I say, if I catch you in a lie, I need to censor you, who gets to decide what a lie is and who doesn't get to decide what a lie is? That's a pretty dangerous slope to go down. So the point being is, the first thing is online neutrality. Throw a couple of likes on something you find funny. Look at your Twitter fear and just enjoy the ride. The second one is to insulate your business and your life from effects of government changes. So this is part of what we teach in our resilience networking that we do with individuals. It's over at Preparedness Labs Incorporated at preparednesslabs.ca. And when in our online course, How to Adopt a Prepared Life, that's also available over on our website, we talk about understanding your exposure to different things. When we talk about individual emergency preparedness and we talk about your ability to be resilient, to handle exogenous shocks, we use critical infrastructure as a framework for that, right? So we say, okay, sit down and take the time to understand your exposure to critical infrastructure. How exposed to it and how dependent on it are you? All 10 sectors, right? It's free of charge, but it takes a bit of time to go through all of the elements within each sector of critical infrastructure. And in the end, for a professional and personal life, over the 0 to 3 days and 3 to 14 days that we recommend, you're looking at about 160 touch points that you're going to have a look at when you do a proper analysis to determine resiliency. You do about 160 touch point analysis on a different timelines for your professional and personal life against the elements and sectors of critical infrastructure. You get an understanding of how dependent you've made yourself by how you've designed your life, how you live your life, how you earn income, which is a perfect, wonderful, and open and free choice for you to do. But doing this preparedness exercise, what it does is you understand the extent to which you're exposed to a shock. So if I'm heavily dependent on the internet to make my money, right? My business is digital business, digital products, digital interaction, one-to-one mentoring and resilience counseling that I do online over Zoom. That requires the internet, right? So I then understand that. I can't really make it redundant in the sense that I can't pick a second internet, right? So I'm on the internet, and if the internet's not available, I'm nowhere. That's just the way the world works. So what I then do is I look at, okay, what steps can I make to make my access to the internet more robust? Maybe I need redundancy in my access points, different ways of getting online and staying online, right? So maybe it's a friend of mine showed me this. He said, here in Canada, we have really Bell and Rogers are your two big internet providers, right? This one individual has both in his house. Absolutely. Full service, fiber or fiber-like gig level internet from two different companies wired to his house because his business is online and he needs in a moment to be able to switch from one modem to the other. So he puts his business and his hardwired stuff on one system and the Wi-Fi services provided by another company within his house. And what that does is it gives him the ability to have some redundancy. He can't have redundancy in the internet. He has redundancy and access to the internet. That's just an example. Another one is if your business requires point of sale. So if you run a bricks and mortar store and you require point of sale access, right, which is your teller, do you have a second one? Right? So if you work with Moneris and Moneris goes down or it's victim of a cyber attack, how do you take payments from customers? Buddy of mine, again, owns a or works at a shop and they have Square as a backup. Now, it costs them a little bit of money every month. They just have the Square attachment that fits onto the phone. Right? They don't have the big device. They just have the small one that fits on their phone. They tap and swipe credit cards on a cell phone, right? So they pay, $20 or $25 a month to keep a system up and running as a backup in there so that if the main point of sale system goes down, they can just switch over, take the customer's money. They don't have a break in income stream. Those are understanding your exposure to the shocks that could impact you. Now roll this into the political sphere, what we've been talking about today. How are you exposed to the political sphere? Well, it depends whether you're in a position where you actually earn money within the political sphere, but more than likely, how are you exposed to decisions the political sphere is going to look at? Now, and a prime example is this. If you have an election coming up, say the United States of America, and you deal somehow in the immigration world, there are two incredibly different plans for immigration in the U.S. Again, you can decide which one you love, okay? The point being is that they're incredibly different, and the United States of America is going to take a turn left or a turn right at this election. If you are involved in the immigration space, you need to determine now how you navigate both those outcomes. How are you going to switch your business? And this is not a decision you're going to make drinking a whiskey on the night of the 5th November. You're too late. You're far too late at that point. You need to make the decision now in April, set the conditions so that when one of those choices are made, you can pivot and run with it, right? You're not going to miss a day of sales. You're going to pivot your business left. You're going to pivot your business right, because again, you're in the business of making money, making profit in a capitalistic environment run by governments that have political agendas. Understand the agendas, understand the choices that'll be made in election, and understand how you intend, both on a personal level and a professional level, to pivot when one of those two outcomes happens, right? It's really that simple. It doesn't cost you any money. It's simply you sitting down and looking at that. So if we then now extrapolate this to more of your life and all parts of your life, we start talking about the linkages to your preparedness plan. And to circle back to what we do here at Preparedness Labs Incorporated, and we've got a free download over on our website at www.preparednesslabs.ca, a free 3-page download that's all about getting your family set up and the conditions that you have to start thinking about to set your family up on the road to adopting a prepared life, is you start to understand that it's understanding your exposure to the world around you and understanding how you're going to react to things that occur. And what we don't talk about here is having a plan for the 27.5 thousand different things that could happen, because again, exogenous shocks are things beyond your control. You don't know what's coming next. You don't know what's going to happen next, nor can you possibly sit down and come up with a contingency plan for everything. So we talk about the trifecta of preparedness plans that form the foundation of the base of your strategy. One is the most likely and least dangerous event, and one is the most dangerous and least likely event. And if you could think of all the events that could possibly happen to you and your family, put them on a spectrum from really when just, disruptive but okay to freaking disturbing and everything in the middle. We set you up to put a plan together for each end of the spectrum. So if you're ready to deal with either end of the spectrum, by default, you're able to navigate what's in the middle. Our third trifecta of preparedness plans is where we start the education and your exposure to the idea that preparedness is not about just disasters or emergencies. Because we talk about is your economic loss. Now, I'm going to posit to you and argue that you losing your job is just as impactful as your house burning down. So if you are in a family and you are the prime breadwinner in the family and you get fired today, what's your plan? Right now, as you're listening to this podcast, you get fired today. What's your plan? What are you going to pivot to? The people who are successful are the people who have very specific, well-defined, and understood plans of exactly what they intend to do when they lose their current job. I've heard tons of people say to me, nobody thinks like that. Nobody goes through life. And the answer is you're right, they don't, which is why when the pandemic happened, what did everybody do? They sat on their arse and they waited until it got better. And then eventually became dependent on government money going into their bank account because they weren't working, but there were a whole slew of people who had pivot plans in place that pivoted to a different employment and took off running down that road and didn't look back and have done exceptionally well. Far better than they would have had they returned to their previous jobs, right? So you're going to lose your current job. You're going to die, you're going to retire, you're going to get fired, or you're going to quit. Every single human will lose the job they're in right now. So why don't you have a strategy for exactly what that looks like when you get fired? And I say this to people all the time. That wildfire that didn't get your home, congratulations, right? Your home made it through, but it burned down where you work. Say you're an apprentice mechanic or you're a certified Red Seal mechanic and you're working at an auto body shop, making great money. You're a wonderful employee. You're doing incredible work. There's tons of business. Bam. Something happens. That place burns down. The owner says, we're going to rebuild. Yeah, I'm going to start giving you a paycheck in a year and a half when this thing's back up and running. What's your plan? Is that the point where you're going to now turn around and try to find work? And then you're going to get mad when you can't find work. You're going to expect somebody to cut you a bunch of checks because you had a bad day. Like, this is your responsibility. And that's why here at Preparedness Labs Incorporated and inside my canoe head, we just talk about personal responsibility, right? We're not talking about, I have not yet once said you're required to invest any money in preparedness. You're not. Now, there may be some things that you need to acquire when you're developing your preparedness plan, when you identify a gap in a capability or a capacity that you want to be able to execute, and you need a piece of material to fit that, then when you identify that gap, it'll clearly tell you exactly, specifically, and directly what that piece of equipment is. You may have to buy something. That's quite possible, but absolutely not necessary. So this is not about money. It's about you taking responsibility. The political sphere is one that a lot of people don't think of. This is why we decided to make this important podcast today, just to talk about understanding the dichotomy of control, and that you really are in control of very little. And the fact that you're getting bent and twisted about all the things that are going on, that's you. That's not the events. That's you choosing to become emotionally unstable because of events that are beyond your control. The second part is understanding the different type of political shocks. The external exogenous shock, your government making a decision, taking a stand, or imposing some new rule on you that you didn't understand. Or you have a lame duck, dangerous presidency that has the potential to go rogue. What do you do about it? Well, your insulation strategy is all about first maintaining a reasonable online neutrality. The second part is about insulating and understanding you and your business's exposure to critical infrastructure and the political sphere through a personal touchpoint analysis. And when you've done that touchpoint analysis, you'll understand it, and that'll inform and help you build a family and business preparedness plan that sets you up for success. Because no matter what happens on the 5th of November in the United States of America, the sun will come up the next day, and you're going to want your business to be making money. So the fact that something egregious would happen on that day that would totally change your ability to earn money, that's your fault, not the change of government's fault. Remember that. If the change of government causes you to lose money in the short to medium term, that is your fault. Nobody wants to hear it, but that's how the world works. You've got months to prepare. You got months to get ready for a plan B to pivot if the government pivots. So with that, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us here at Inside My Canoe Head. Drop over to our website, insidemycanoehead.ca. There is a lot of stuff there for you, a couple of cool links to check out. As well, listen, if you appreciate what you hear and you just want to say thanks to me, there's a Buy Me a Coffee button there. $5 Canadian, a lot less American. You can buy me a nice hot cup of joe. And if that doesn't work out, listen, I ask you to do one thing. One thing only with this podcast is to tell somebody else about it. Tell somebody to come on over, join us at Inside My Canoe Head. Listen, tell us what you think. There's a link there to my email at the bottom of insidemycanoehead.ca. Send me a line. Tell me what you think. What subject would you like to hear? What subject do you not want to hear any more about? We love your feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. We get them all, and we treat them all with love. So thank you very much once again. Take care and stay safe.